welcome to 31 Days of Horror, Day 2. It was the weekend, and out of the 2 first days of October, we've managed 2 movies. It's not a good start, and if not for a film festival later in the month, I would be panicking right now. But that's okay. We will continue on because it is what we do. Today we are talking about The Last Exorcism Part 2. Yeah. You're probably thinking what I'm thinking. What I thought when I first saw the trailers for this film. How can you have a Part 2, a sequel to The Last Exorcism? The Last Exorcism is The Last Exorcism. If you have a Part 2, then The Last Exorcism is not The Last Exorcism. It is the second Last Exorcism. Well, yeah, that's essentially it. I will start off by saying in Part 2, there is technically an exorcism performed. It is quite short, so it isn't nearly as much as the first film. Now, this is a direct sequel to the first film and continues right where the last film leaves off. In fact, the opening to the film uses the ending to the first film to get it going. This film is directed by Ed Gass-Donnelly, who you probably don't know, but he is a Canadian boy. He's from Toronto, born in Toronto. I'm slightly older than him, but not by much. And he hasn't done too much. His debut film feature, This Beautiful City, played at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, and was nominated for 4 Genie Awards. After that, he did a picture called Small Town Murder Songs, and then this one. So, yeah, he's not exactly a experienced veteran, but he at least has had some work. He's directed before. So, that being said, is the directing okay in this film? Sure. It's very much, it's nothing uber special, but it gets the job done. The film is written by Damien Chazelle, who, you never know the writers really, do you? But he, after this, went and wrote Whiplash, which was up for an Academy Award, and I believe it was based off of the short that he had written. And then he also did La La Land, which I think it was the winner of TIFF this year, or I don't know. A lot of people were talking about it, so definitely something to look forward to. But for people who are watching this video and who are into horror, he's the person behind the screenplay for 10 Cloverfield Lane. So, yeah, take it however you wish. In terms of the cast, Ashley Bell returns to reprise her role from the first film. And oddly enough, I mean, she's had 2 films, Last Exorcism Part 1 and then Part 2, where she is the main star. She is the main character. It all revolves around her. And obviously, if you've seen the first one, or even if you've seen the second one, you know that she does some, very dramatic acting, but she's never really moved off of that in any real, shape. I mean, she was in The Marine 3, direct-to-video movie, whatever, and really a bunch of nothings after that, which is too bad. I wouldn't say she is the best actor out there. I think her acting is decent, and I would like to see her in more, but I'd like to see her in more bigger budget films. Unfortunately, a lot of these lower budget ones, some actors will put themselves forward in everything they do. Others will, some of them just go out for the paycheck. And when it comes to the lower budget ones, they don't often tend to put as much of themselves forward as you would like. So I'm looking for more from her in a different vein. I'd love to see that. Let's see, who else is in this? Oh, reprising his role again from the first film, in part. You may be wondering why, is Louis Hurdom, who plays her father. And if you've seen the first film, I'll try and keep it spoiler free. You're wondering, how is he in the second film? That doesn't make any sense. Well, let's just say he's not in it a lot. But he does, he is in, throughout the film, he does make appearances. Now, if you're wondering who he is, he's done a lot of stuff. I was surprised to find out he had done a recurring role in Murder, She Wrote, because a lot of the Murder, She Wrote shows were very, other than, the main character, different people all the time. But yeah, apparently he did over 20 episodes of it, so apparently they liked him. But yeah, he'd done a whole bunch of different stuff. Trying to think if there was anything. Yeah, a lot of bit roles, a lot of small parts here and there. A few episodes of True Blood, but most likely people are going to know him now because he was in a few episodes of Longmire, if you're into westerns. But right now he's doing Westworld as Peter Abernathy. So if you're looking forward to Westworld, you've been watching it, I think it started last weekend or this weekend, I can't remember. Either way, I do believe it is starting soon, if it hasn't already. And so he's definitely from that. Now, the story behind part 2 is essentially they discover Nell and believe that what happened to her was the result of a cult. And so she goes into sort of like a foster care for troubled teen girls. And so she's in a sort of like a group home, a very loose atmosphere group home. I'm guessing she's being provided for by the state. That's the only thing I can think of. And so she's in there. There's a bunch of other girls, and she is working as a housekeeper at a motel this is all in New Orleans, and such is life there. Now, the person in charge of this home is played by Muse Watson, who was somebody, honestly, who he looked familiar, and I didn't know him by the name. I looked it up, and I was like, where do I know that guy from? But he's been in a bunch of stuff, which is why I kind of recognized him, right? It's not one of those things where it's like, oh, I recognize him from this, or he's a secondary character in all his movies type things, but not like a Bruce Campbell type thing. But he's one of those things, you picture him and you're like, I know, where did I see him? Well, he was Benjamin Willis in I Know What You Did Last Summer. He was C.W. Niles in From Dusk Till Dawn 2, Texas Blood Money. He was, what else was he in? I'm trying to think, there was another thing that Frankenfish, which I watch. I'll be honest, I really like Frankenfish. I watch it quite often, and he plays Elmer in that movie. And then he was Charles Westmoreland from Prison Break, which is, I think that's where I recognize him, because, you know, obviously recurring character, you see him over and over again. So I think that's really where I kind of recognize him from, even though I had seen him in, obviously, those other things I've just mentioned. Yeah, that's where I likely would have seen him, as well as recently I would have seen him in Suburban Gothic, because was that last year or the year before? Toronto After Dark, I can't remember. Either way, it was part of the 31 Days of Horror. So he has appeared in another film, oddly enough. It's amazing how you get that over and over again with the characters and such, right? So he plays sort of like a doctor, well, not a doctor, like a therapist almost. And he's in there, he's not in there a lot, but he does, it's more to get, you know, because to break the cult hold on Nell, who, you know, thought, you know, believes she's possessed by a demon and stuff, and he's trying to essentially get it so that she doesn't believe that anymore, and that it's just because of the cult that she believes this. So that's kind of his role in the film. And every time something comes up or she gets scared or something, he just sort of pops in and is like, oh, it's all in your head. Don't worry about it. It's not real. Right? Outside of that, there's only a couple more characters who are really there quite a bit. One is obviously the roommate and I guess the first person to friend Nell, played by Julia Garner, who also was one of those ones where I immediately, right off the bat, was like, I know I've seen this person. I know I've seen this person. And it's obvious why. She was Susan in The Perks of Being a Wallflower. She was Rose Parker in We Are What We Are, which, again, another, Toronto After Dark, 31 Days of Horror. She was Marcy in Sin City, A Dame to Kill For. That's Sin City Dos. But I would have recently most recognized her from her small but recurring role in The Americans, which, if you've been watching my Show Me Some television series, I've covered a couple of seasons of that, and she played the Kimberly Brellan character in that show. So that's where I definitely recognized her from. And oddly enough, I don't think she was used quite enough in this film. I would have expected more of her character, especially considering the amount of experience she has while still being relatively young. Finally, the last person of note in this film is Spencer Treat Clark, who essentially is the love interest, Nell's love interest in the film. And again, another person who's really not used much at all. Not enough to really make a real dent in it. But he's one of those people who's had a pretty decent career. He was in Arlington Road. He was in Gladiator. He was in Unbreakable, Mystic River, and these were all when he was like young. Like Unbreakable, he's the kid. He's the young boy. Then, progressing on from there, more into his older years, he was then in Last House on the Left from 2009, Camp Hell in 2010, and then of course, this one, and again, another Toronto After Dark film, The Town That Dreaded Sundown from 2014. He played Corey, but I think a lot of people will probably recognize him now from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. If you've been watching that, he played the character of Alexander Braun slash, Werner von Stroker. So, whatever you want to say. So yeah, he's had quite a career from young up until now, and I expect to see probably a lot more of him as long as his agent's good, because he's not bad actually, despite the fact that he doesn't seem to be used much. And that really takes me to the film and my thoughts on it, which, get to it now. I've talked and talked and talked. The film doesn't have much substance. It plays out more, very much like a ghost story, and has a lot of jump scares, mostly due to loud noises. Some have some correlation to the story and the narrative going along. Others are just thrown in there for whatever reason. Some, there is a little bit of build up, but a lot of them, they're out of nowhere, which I think is why they kind of worked in this film, because you're just sort of watching it and then BAM! It comes out of nowhere, right? But I think this film really lacked the suspense it needed. There's a build-up of all these scares, but they really go nowhere. It kind of had a feel like End of Days, more so than The Last Exorcism Part 1 or A Ghost Story. It was very much like, End of Days, or what is it, Seventh Sign, something along those lines. There was another one, but out of my head, where it's sort of like the end of the world type thing, because she's dealing with this demon, and the demon could bring around the end of the world. So it really feels more akin to those films, with more jump scares, like a lot more jump scares thrown in there. So the substance of the film is kind of lacking. There is no real there is a character development, but it's so here and there, and kind of forced almost. It's unfortunate. Like, this is a film that runs an hour and a half, 90 minutes long, which is kind of standard. But I think they should have. I think they should have done. It should have been longer, and there should have been more. There should have been more interaction between Nell and her friends, or her new friends, and more with her, love interest and stuff. And let's see more of that progression. Let's not just sort of, count on our previous knowledge of films, which is really what they're doing here. Previous knowledge of stories, just sort of like hinting at stuff. This is what, giving you enough to know, okay, this is what's happening, rather than showing it. And when they do show it, it's really, it's sort of like really quickly built up to, and it's just like there isn't no gradual development of everything. It could have been better. Then we get to the fact that there's this exorcism, and now, comes at the end of the film, but it's so short. It is so short that you had this whole build-up of the entire film, and then you get to the exorcism portion, and unlike in the first film where that's where the climax happens, this is sort of anticlimactic. Honestly, it really is anticlimactic. And then you get the ending denouement, if you will. It's not even really a denouement much, which is just, it's bad. It's really bad and cheesy, with some really bad CG going on. So yeah, The Last Exorcism Part 2, I'm glad I did not pay to see this in theaters. I think it is something that I would probably watch back to back. If I was going to be watching The Last Exorcism Part 1, I'd probably do 1 and 2. I don't foresee there being a Part 3. God, I hope not. Because the Last Exorcism Part 3, I mean, Part 2 sounds bad enough, but Part 3, come on. You're just really stretching it at that point. I mean, Part 2, you're stretching it, but this yeah, you catch my drift, right? But the story doesn't really lend itself to going anywhere, especially with the ending that it has. So yeah, if you've seen The Last Exorcism, I would say if you can find, you know, the movie really, really cheap, or if it's on Netflix or something, you know, streaming that you're already paying for, why not watch it? But honestly, it does have a few scares. So if you're looking, you know what, if you're looking for something to give you a couple of jump scares and just watch, this is it. If you want it to give you that and have some kind of a meaning and a great story, this is not the film for you. I would stick to something else. But if you're just looking for a few scares, check it out. It has it more than a lot of the other films I've seen that people raved about, saying, well, I guess it all depends, right? Some people love jump scares. Some people think they're stupid. Whatever. I like them. If it scares you, if you jump, then it did its job, right? And there are several, and I mean many moments in this film where it'll probably get you, and that would be the only regret for not seeing this in the theater, because I have a tendency to kind of get a kick out of watching an entire theater go you know, and people yell out and scream and stuff. I kind of get a kick out of that. I don't know why. And I think that probably would have worked with The Last Exorcism Part 2. But in general, I don't think the film is that good. I'd probably give it a 2 out of 5 if I had to rate it anything. Simply because it did get a theatrical. It is you know, it's got a budget behind it. It was, you know, whatever. But yeah. I don't know. It's one of those things where I think they were just churning it out. The first film did really, really well. They just wanted a sequel. And that's how we ended up with The Last Exorcism Part 2. So there you go. 31 Days of Horror Day 2, and we've got 2 duds right off the bat. Oh well, let's see what happens on the next one. Anyways, thanks for watching. Till next video, take care. Have a good one. Should have brought a Bible or something, you know. Exorcise the demons that are these movies.